I have always believed that the dead leave more behind than we bury with them. Not in any mystical sense. I don't mean that literally. I mean it in the quieter, more ordinary way, the way a person's handwriting outlives their hands. The way a smell, old wood, dried roses, the particular soap someone used for 40 years, can return a person to you so completely that the air itself seems to grieve. The dead leave traces. They leave evidence of themselves in drawers and boxes and the backs of closets, and it is the living who must decide what to do with it all. I had been living in my grandmother's house for 11 days when I found the diary. Her name was Eleanor. Eleanor Ruth Calloway, born 1931, died this past January at 91 years old, in the same house she had lived in for 63 years. She had outlived my grandfather by 22 years, and had spent those years alone in this house on Wren Street in the way that certain old women choose to be alone. Not with loneliness, but with intention. With a life arranged precisely to her own preferences, accountable to no one. I had loved her, but I had not known her. I think this is more common than people admit. We know the version of our grandparents that they choose to show us. The Sunday afternoon version, the birthday version, the version that smells of good cooking and asks about school. We do not know the full person, the young person, the person who existed before we did and who carried inside themselves a whole interior life we were never invited into. I inherited the house because there was no one else. My mother, Eleanor's daughter, had died 6 years ago. I had no siblings. My father had been out of the picture since I was 9. The house came to me, and with it came the responsibility of deciding what to do with 63 years of accumulated living. I had come intending to stay 2 weeks, to sort, to donate, to close. I had not intended to stay longer, but the house had its own intentions. I found the diary on a Wednesday morning, in the smaller of the 2 upstairs bedrooms, the room that had been my mother's when she was a child, though by the time I knew this house, it had been repurposed as a sewing room. Eleanor had kept her machine there and her fabrics, and her patterns stacked in manila envelopes along the windowsill. I had pulled up the old rug to check the condition of the floorboards. Underneath, the house was going on the market, and I had been advised to assess the floors before listing. Beneath the rug, the boards were old pine, warm-colored, worn smooth in the center from decades of foot traffic. Mostly sound, but in the far corner near the window, one board was slightly raised, just slightly. The edge of it lifted perhaps half an inch above its neighbor, and when I pressed it, it moved. It had been deliberately loosened. The nails along one edge had been removed, and the board lifted cleanly away to reveal a gap in the subfloor below. A shallow space, 6 inches deep, perhaps 12 inches wide. Inside the gap was a cloth bundle tied with kitchen twine. I sat back on my heels for a long moment. Then I untied the twine. Inside the cloth was a notebook, not large, perhaps 5 inches by 7, with a dark blue cover gone soft with age. And beside it, wrapped separately in a piece of brown paper, a small photograph. I looked at the photograph first. A young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, standing in a garden I did not recognize. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at something to the left or someone, and her expression was the expression of a woman looking at something that makes the whole world around it irrelevant. She was radiantly, privately happy in a way that had nothing to do with being photographed and everything to do with what she was looking at. I recognized her face because it was my grandmother's face, Eleanor's face 50 or 60 years before I knew it. I had never seen her look like that. I opened the notebook. March 14th, 1961. I am writing this because I have no one left to tell. Margaret has been sworn to secrecy and I trust her with it, but I cannot keep calling her. Long distance costs more than I have, and Harold watches the phone bill. So instead, I will tell this notebook, and it will hold it, and perhaps that will be enough. His name is Thomas. I will not write his last name. Just Thomas. We met at the library. That is the most unremarkable sentence I have ever written, and it contains the most remarkable. thing that has ever happened to me. I stopped reading. I looked at the photograph again, at the young woman looking at something to the left with the expression that belonged to no version of Eleanor I had ever known. Then I turned back to the notebook. She had written in it for 8 months. From March of 1961 to October of that same year. The entries were not daily. Sometimes weeks passed between them. But each one was dense with feeling, written in the tight, careful hand of someone who had learned to compress themselves, to take up less space than they needed. I read it in one sitting. I sat on the floor of that sewing room with the afternoon light moving across the bare floorboards, and I read every word my grandmother had written for herself alone. In a year of her life she had never spoken of to anyone. I will tell you what I found. Thomas was a teacher. He taught literature at the school 2 towns over, which is where Eleanor had been working as a secretary, a job she took after her father's death to support herself and her mother. They began talking in the library on a Tuesday afternoon when she reached for the same book he was reaching for, which sounds like the beginning of every story ever told. And perhaps that is because some true things are true in exactly the way stories say they are. They fell in love over 4 months. I know what this is. She wrote in May. I have known since the second Tuesday. I am not confused about it, and I am not deceiving myself. I know what love is supposed to feel like because I have felt the other thing, the comfortable thing, the sensible thing, and I know the difference. The difference is that when I am with Thomas, I am entirely myself. Without apology, without arrangement, I am exactly who I am. I did not know that was possible. The comfortable thing, the sensible thing, she meant Harold. My grandfather, Harold Calloway, whom she had been engaged to since the previous spring, a practical match. By all accounts, he was steady and employed, and came from a good family, and her mother approved. She had said yes without great enthusiasm and had told herself, she wrote, that enthusiasm was a young woman's luxury and practical was the thing that kept you warm in winter. And then there was Thomas. June 2nd. Harold has set the date. September 14th. He announced it at dinner with my mother as if it were a business transaction being finalized, which I suppose is exactly what it is. My mother was so pleased. I smiled. I am becoming very good at smiling through things. I have not told Thomas about the date. I know I must. I know I must also stop seeing him. I know these things the way you know the existence of a door you have no intention of walking through. The entries through June and July had a quality of someone living in 2 worlds. Simultaneously, meeting Thomas at the library, at a small coffee house 2 towns over, at a park where they walked for hours in the summer heat, while also attending to the machinery of the approaching wedding, the dress fittings, the guest list, the arrangements. She wrote about both with the same pen in the same hand. And the contrast was so stark it was almost unbearable to read. July 19th. He asked me today if I was happy. Thomas, he looked at me across the table and he asked simply, without preamble, are you happy, Eleanor? And I did not answer immediately because the question undid something in me. No one has ever asked me that before. Not my mother, not Harold, not anyone. Are you happy? As if it were a thing that mattered. As if the answer would change what happened next. I told him the truth. I said, I am happy right now in this moment, in this chair, across from you. He understood what I did not say. He is very good at hearing what is not said. He held my hand across the table for a long time without speaking. I set the notebook down on my knee. Outside the window, the street was quiet. A Wednesday afternoon in a residential neighborhood going about its ordinary life. A car passed. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Small sounds. The sounds of a world that does not slow down for grief. I picked up the notebook and kept reading. In August, she told Thomas about the wedding. She had postponed the telling for as long as she could manage. When she finally said it, sitting across from him in the coffee house on a Thursday afternoon, looking at the table while she said it, because she could not look at his face. He was quiet for a very long time. He didn't argue, she wrote. That is the thing I keep returning to. He didn't argue or plead or make it harder than it already was. He asked me once if this was what I wanted, and I told him the truth, which is that what I want and what I'm able to do are not the same thing. My mother has nothing. I have nothing without Harold. The world is arranged in a way that does not accommodate what I want. He said, I know, and then he said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, I will not ask you to choose differently, but I want you to know in a place that nothing can reach, that what happened between us was real, that it will always have been real, that nothing that comes after can make it less true than it is. I came home and I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then I helped my mother hem my wedding dress. They were married in September as planned. The diary entries in September and October were brief, the handwriting slightly less controlled, the feeling in them compressed to the point of opacity, as if she had decided, at last, to stop telling the notebook things that were too large for it to hold. The last entry was written in October, undated. Just a few lines in the center of the page. I am going to put this away now. Not because it is over, but because I have decided to live a different life than the one I am writing about here. I am going to be a good wife. I believe I can be. Harold is not unkind. He is simply insufficient, in the particular way that men are insufficient when they have never been asked to be more. I will put this away and I will put it beneath the floor of the room. I will give my children, and I will keep it there, and perhaps someday, long after I am gone, when none of it can hurt anyone, someone will find it and know that I was here, that I was fully alive, that I loved someone with my whole self once and was loved the same way in return, that it was real, that it was mine. I sat for a long time after I read the last line. The afternoon light had shifted while I read, moved across the floor in the slow, indifferent way of light that does not know or care what is happening beneath it, and the room had grown cooler, the October air coming in through the gap at the bottom of the old window. I looked at the photograph again. Eleanor, 19 or 20, looking at Thomas, looking at the man, just outside the frame with an expression of complete and unguarded joy. I thought about the woman I had known, the Eleanor of Sunday afternoons and birthday cakes and firm, practical advice about life. The woman who had lived alone in this house for 22 years after my grandfather's death without, as far as I had ever observed, any apparent distress at the solitude, who had tended her garden and attended her church and kept her life in meticulous order. I had thought I knew what that life meant. I had thought it was evidence of contentment, of a woman who had made her peace with things. I understood now that it was something more complicated, something that deserved more credit than contentment, the achievement of a person who had held something painful and something beautiful inside the same chest for 60 years and had not been diminished by either. She had been, I realized, a person of tremendous, quiet courage. Not the courage of grand gestures, but the harder, more ordinary courage of continuing, of choosing every single day to be present to the life that was available to her while carrying, beneath it, a whole other life that had been real, that had always been real. I did not put the diary back. I wrapped it carefully in its cloth and I did downstairs and I sat at the kitchen table, Eleanor's kitchen table, where she had sat every morning for 63 years, and I kept it with me for the rest of the day. That night, I called the estate agent and told him I needed another week. I did not know yet what I would do with the house, whether I would sell it or keep it, whether I would stay in this city or return to mine, whether any of the arrangements I had made for my life were still the arrangements I wanted. But I knew that I was not ready to close it. Not yet. Not without sitting with it a little longer, with this house, and with the woman who had lived in it, and with the story she had left beneath the floorboards for someone to find. She had written, perhaps someday, long after I'm gone, when none of it can hurt anyone, someone will find it and know that I was here. I was here, Eleanor. I found it, and I want you to know, in whatever place such things can be known, that it does not make me think less of you. It makes me think more. It makes me think of you as what you were. A whole person with a whole interior life, who loved and grieved and chose and continued, who was fully alive, who was, until today, a stranger to me, and whom I think I am only now beginning to know. I kept the photograph. It sits on my windowsill now in my own home in a city far from Wren Street. A young woman standing in a garden, looking at something, someone, just outside the frame, radiantly, privately happy. Every morning when I pass it, I think of the courage it takes to love someone with your whole self, and the different, quieter courage it takes to fold that love carefully and put it away and go on living. She did both. She did them both for 60 years, and she left the proof of it in a dark blue notebook beneath the floorboards of a room where her children slept, trusting that eventually someone would know where to look. I found it, Eleanor. It was real. It will always have been real.